Hello and welcome. You're listening to the audio presentation of She Came From Nowhere, the novelization of a 13-book series. It is the story of a secret agent from a multiversal government agency discovering the location of God and taking action to kill her. The series covers the war between gods and mortals who create and destroy themselves and their worlds. The novels are written and performed by Caleb Morazi. If you would like to support the creation of this series and add input of your own, swing by patreon.com/shecamefromnowhere to become a secret agent. You'll get access to the entire novel, new series chapters as they become available, and audio from each. Link in the description. And now, enjoy Chapter 7, The Great Awakening. 1. Benariel Sewer told them to be vigilant, not wanting to let any foreign agent do to anyone else what they had done to their cousin Legimer. So Candel Feifel and his brother stayed alert, watching the Furbtech TV 39 hours a day. Nothing came or left Ahayel without them knowing, and day after day, month after month, nothing happened. Millions of tourists and merchants were constantly arriving. Without fail, they bought a little owl-like hamster, and their private conversations were examined, the juiciest bits of gossip being passed on to the Feifel brothers to debate. They especially loved to argue loudly over a round of ginger root slings and the highest goat, tearing each new piece of information apart until the next interesting tidbit came along. They had carried on like this for so long that they kind of forgot why they were monitoring and discussing the comings and goings at all. It was just what they did, and anyone who wanted to be in the know would only have to drink at the goat with them. They never revealed how they knew what they did, but it was obvious that they were intimately connected to everything that happened in Ohio. So that's where Ever and Triton went when they were looking for Sequi. For someone who'd only seen a handful of worlds in the multiverse, Ever seemed unfazed by the variety of creatures that lived in the multidimensional city. Triton had worried that he'd have to keep him safe or acclimate him to the sights, but the man took everything in stride. Felix sensed he was amazed, but he carried on like he wasn't. Well, if it isn't the man who doesn't like adorable things, Candel's brother Anno says as Ever walks into the goat. All eyes turn to them as the pair approach the Jelvins. You've decided we're finally good enough to talk to, then? Couldn't find a way to breach Kamatosho, so you're taking a more roundabout path? And careful with this one, he says softly to the others, looking at the readout on his glove. He's from a timeline that completely collapsed. Cause is unknown. He's expected to be volatile. Good. I'm glad I don't have to introduce myself, Ever says, sitting down at their table. I don't care what you guys do on this planet with the mind control devices. It's a bad long-term investment, but not really my business. What I am concerned with is the creature you're keeping that no one knows about. The one that looks like him, he says, nodding at Triton. I am volatile, but I would prefer to not have to resort to that if possible. Just give us the girl. We solve your problem. No one is the wiser. Ever notices Anno reaching for his glove, and he swivels his head toward him. You don't want to do that. We're taking the creature either way. We thought we'd give you a chance before tearing your skyscraper down. How you handle it from here is up to you, so I'm giving you a choice. Do you want to walk out of here unscathed? Sequi opens her eyes, awaking from dreams of life, love, and war. She is aware that it is real, that people were dying on every world she lived in, and it breaks her heart. She longs to set things right, stop them from hating and killing each other, but her muscles won't move. Benariel Sewer stands over her, so they finally come to the light, the Jelvin says. Claiming to be doing us a favor, but we know why they're here. They're here for the Kwai Mono, like every other world. They think they can harness its power better than we can, but they know nothing. They're fools to oppose us. Don't think we're not aware of your friends' movements. The central government has been a thorn in our side for centuries, and now, with the combined power of the League of Planets, we'll crush them. They're like the slime under every rock that dries up when exposed, and we will expose them. Let them come. Benira glides to the door, waving her gloved hand in the air as she leaves. Your usefulness to us is over. You're free to go. As the door closes, Sequi feels tingling throughout her entire body as her frozen muscles regain their movement, and she tentatively unfolds her wings, lifting herself off the bed. She can see the city far below, and the villages just outside its walls. 2. Before Benariel can get down the hall, she feels herself being pulled back. It wasn't a real or even mental tug, it was a feeling of wrongness in the very fiber of her being. She turned to see the creature floating silently after her. Since it had no eyes, it was impossible to tell if it was looking at her, but she could feel its presence, reaching out to her, and there was nothing she could do to resist it. Benario began to wonder if, in fact, everything she had ever done was really only leading her into this moment. "What do you want?" she asked in a hushed, reverent tone. "Don't hurt me." The creature's laugh filled her with light unlike anything she had anticipated. It made her suddenly feel young. "I want you to bless me," the creature said. "I can't leave here without it." Benario was completely baffled by this. A blessing from her? It was completely absurd. The Jelvin was no psychic, but the absolute power she sensed emanating from the creature, now that it had fully regained consciousness, was enough to drop her to the carpet on her knees before it. I can't," she stammered. "I have nothing to offer." "Perhaps just directions," the creature said gently, speaking just above a whisper. "Take the telepads outside the city. Our ancestors will show you the way." "Where's the creature I came with?" Sequi asked, helping the Jelvin off the floor. "He left," Benario said, grasping the clawed hand in awe. "Split as soon as he could." "He's returning," the creature said. "But I don't mean him. I mean the little one. I sense that it has become a mother to many, many children." "What did you make her do?" "Nothing that it wasn't already doing," the house matron says defensively. "They're born to replicate. If they don't, they die quickly. Besides, they're not hurting anyone." Sequi trips on a rug as they move to the elevators, and the Jelvin instinctively reaches out to steady her, amused that a creature of such eminence lacked grace. "Just the same, I need to collect her. What you do with the rest is up to you, but that one is bound to me, and it's suffering from it." They get on the elevator. "She's seen too much." Benario has no idea what she means, so says nothing until they arrive on the floor for breeding the Furbtech. She nods to the security, who waves a gloved hand to allow them to enter, and she watches the creature's reaction as it takes in the form. The attendants look up in terror as Sequi uses her wings to lift off the floor and glides over the pens, visually scanning them. The creature lets out a screech and listens as one of the owl-like hamsters squeaks back. Sequi crashes to the floor near it in excitement. As Sequi cuddled with her long-lost friend, she saw the thoughts and memories of every creature on every world that the device had connected to. All of their memories, their desires and fears, their families and ancestors. She wasn't just witnessing their actions like she had since the universes began. She was actually living it with them, as them. Suddenly it all made sense. They didn't need to make their own choices. They needed her. Everything was such a mess on their worlds, and she would use the device to make it all better. She knew eventually every creature on every world would recognize that she was the author of their reality, but she couldn't wait until the universe collapsed. Their governments were failing them now. They were killing each other now, starving one another with their greed and selfishness. She blessed them with free will and the freedom to make their worlds into whatever they desired, but they used it to grab as much as they could for themselves. Through the Furbtech, she began showing them another way. There was resistance from every creature on every world. When the Furbtech fed their egos with grand visions of world domination, everyone was on board where it would lead, but suddenly when Sequi broke the spell of freeing their minds and giving them the opportunity to choose, to care for one another, they balked. The uproar broke her heart. Caring for one another was the entire reason that she made so many of them. No one was ever supposed to be alone, but they seemed fixated on making it so. The Imogen wanted to exploit the reliance on the Furbtech to make them obedient to her perfect plan, and she knew she could bend their will to hers, but that's not why she created them. She didn't want them as mere extensions of herself. She wanted them to be separate and unique, desiring what she wanted because they wanted it. She was already dreaming up their existence. She wanted them to be co-creators of their realities. She could show them how to love one another, but they had to choose it. Sequi's clawed foot catches on the pen's fence railing as she climbs out, and her Furbtech goes flying with a shriek, causing all the other owl-like hamsters in the room to shriek too. Their noise becomes deafening, and all the Jelvs who attend them scurry around trying to quiet them with their favorite toys and songs. When that doesn't work, their gloves neuralizers. The Imogen scoops hers up and looks sheepishly at Benario. "You may not believe this, but it's for your own good." The elderly Jelvin pulls herself upright, pursing her lips, arching an eyebrow at the creature before gliding from the room. "Ancestors, I beg you, take this beast before it brings the house down around our ears." The Furbtech still shrieking, Benario closes the door and says in a more conversational tone, "We're getting you out of here before you can do any more damage." The house of Kamatosho's matron furtively guides Sakui out of the city and up into the mountains where their ancestral spirits lived. The Imogene mapped in her mind all the worlds she would visit to bring peace. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but, she reasoned, if she could just show them how to live, then they wouldn't want to fight and kill each other anymore. Influencing them from far away only gave them the idea that it was possible, but if she demonstrated on their homeworld, it would be irrefutable. Sukan nestles in the scarab tech hive on Furbia, latching onto their telepathic abilities to watch the sphinxes guarding the only doorway off the planet. She'd seen many creatures enter through it only to be unable to answer the Guardians' riddles and be cut down by their claws. The Furbians had been contaminated from outside, so they were fiercely isolationists. No one went in or out. The Furbian proverb went, "Our pools carry life that kills their fish, and their fish overwhelm our waters." But she knew that he was coming. She could feel his approach. The ancient dingo who was a man, he was coming, and they would stop her uncle's crazy plan to take over the multiverse. The death of the Dark Lord in the Hell world he inhabited had created a power vacuum. She could feel him fighting tooth and claw against all the dukes who were trying to fill her shoes, assuming that he was the one who had taken up her mantle. Protu's death had, in fact, imbued Tetraserini with power, just like every death after hers did, each struggle becoming easier than the last. Before long, he was the Emperor of Yama, and there was no one to oppose him. With a sigh of relief, the dingo, stronger than he'd ever been, moves to the doorway, crosses into Furbia, where he's felled by the Sphinx. 3. I helped collect the creature's quantum counterpart, Griffin argues with Sarah Kay. I'm not a total turncoat. Rogue agent, maybe, but that's how we survive, baby. The CIB director eyes him as he toys with his restraints. Don't baby me, Agent Ibernus. I'm not an off-world minx. We've gone Furbtech. It's under control. I open the Pandora's box and I want to help close it. His tone becomes more soft and friendly. Come on, Kay, you've known me since the academy. This is the most far-reaching breach the CIB has ever faced. Shouldn't your best agent be on the case? I said no, Griff. You're lucky you haven't been glass-cubed. Don't tempt me. You're not thinking clearly, Griffin says, as he imperceptibly manipulates the straps. The Furbtech spread rapidly and undoubtedly have made connections with many of your iterations. They don't have direct control over you yet, but you are definitely beginning to show sign of their influence. When have you ever been okay with another entity running the multiverse? You've always said, all of us are better than one of us. Griffin pops his restraints, flinging himself off the bed towards Sarah Kay, his newly regrown muscles screaming. The director takes a glass cube from her pocket, but he snatches it out of her hand and pulls her close, his arm across her chest. Griffin, you don't want to do this, she says, as he holds the cube out to the holographic staff. You're right. I don't, he hisses in her ear. But I will unless we get a transversor, he says loud enough for the room to hear. He lowers his voice again. You're coming with me. We're going to go find her, and once you meet her, you'll see why I did what I did. I wasn't just disobeying orders. It was for the highest good. Something you won't appreciate until you meet her. Outside the doors, they're greeted by a tall cybernetic jellyfish, human-sized bees in technoplating, and Ilex. My, don't you all look scary, Griffin laughs. But you better be here just to escort us, or our beloved director is going to become useless to everyone. Do you want her to have the mind of a child? Do what he says, Sarah Kay commands. Take us to the docking bay. She began thinking about all the things she could become if her personal timeline was absorbed into the next one closest to her. Many people attributed her rise to the top of the bureau as luck or good fortune, maybe hard work paying off, and there was always whispers about the favors she did behind closed doors. Rumors, sure, but persistent nonetheless. If they only knew the truth. A truth so insidious that even those who considered it laughed at it being simply too evil to consider. She was, for all intents and purposes, trimming her life tree. From her position of power, she was able to make it look like accidents, tragic but unavoidable side effects of the mission she sent her agents on, and only those closest to her, like Griffin, were able to suspect a thing. It took a huge number of cleodynamic calculations to find the right space-time, but she had done it. Collapsing large portions of her branching iterations, empowering herself with their chi. She was well aware she wasn't the only being she was affecting, and she couldn't help but wonder if she had somehow brought this situation on herself. The Imogen was quantumly related to her, but had it always existed? Had she made it occur from tampering with the multiversal fabric? Was it forming from the rift she'd inevitably caused with her clipping and trimming? Was the tsunami created to wipe her out? Sorry, Kay, you know this isn't personal, Griffin says as they near the docking bay. But you got me in a classic Bowman-Smild. No way out. You do the exact same thing. The doors slide open, and inside are agents from 1,000 worlds. A hush falls as they evaluate the situation, echoes of their chatter dying in the air. I wasn't even planning on grabbing you. It just became a possibility, so I took it. Besides, you were getting tired of sitting in HQ. I know it. You're a field agent, and staying cooped up here is slowly killing you. I know that time dilation is playing a big part with all my jumping around, but girl, you're aging way too fast for my taste. Gotta keep you close, or lose you. 4. Humans were the minority on Benji, having been dominated by their technological creations long ago. They were kept as pets on ranches for the amusement of the machines, something to be marveled at the way that humans gaze on near-extinct species. Terrence took advantage of this fact. Although they were aware he was foreign, recognizing his odd quantum signature, they in no way saw him as a threat. In fact, the opposite was true. Their memories couldn't fade, so they were bored with their specimens and amusedly took the little central agent wherever he wanted to go in search for certain. On Centric, the Council meets in the clouds, their golden skin and hair shimmering in the sun as wind ruffles their large wings. It's simply too early to tell if you will be successful, Saki says, and the rushing chorus of voices comment to their species. I can see a multitude of timelines where he succeeds and an equal number where he fails. Gabriel unfurls their wings thoughtfully. There are hosts of timelines where the man's never killed Baradian, less where she escaped. When we consider the choices, we still have the benefit of Baradian's advice both in their headquarters and on the Council with us. Why are we so fixated on taking vengeance on this one corner of para-reality? Doesn't it seem petty for beings like us? Or are we missing something? Brothers, you lack foresight, Saki says, carefully choosing their words in every timeline at once. You only see what was and what is. We've seen all of the outcomes of the man's actions. Their personal vendetta set off a series of actions that causes the little creature to spread everywhere and every when. We believe we are safe here in the clouds, but we fool ourselves. We're as susceptible to the allure of power as any other being who has fallen and will fall. The creatures cross into timelines where Baradian lives, and eventually the fabric of the para-reality gets tightened into a dense knot. There's a murmur like the sound of rushing waves as the Council holds an unfathomable number of conversations. After what could have been either an eternity or a single moment, their leader Trayton raises their hands, standing in their shimmering glory. It has been decided. We will go to the heart of the para-reality with Gabriel and Saki to offer aid. It's unlike anything it has ever done, but we will beg it to turn back the course of time, overrule the choices of the many, and make everything new again. We may not be able to see futures, Gabriel says, but it seems the only way. On Benji, Certain sits neck deep in the snow, his mind far from the present. He watched the Council depart from his quantum counterpart. He was sure the being was aware of him, but he cloaked himself behind their infallible ego. Their self-assured pride would be their downfall. They believed that they were invulnerable, and Certain let them believe it. Terrence struggled through the deep snow towards the last free human outpost. He felt like giving up, but Pamela's ghost wouldn't let him. He knew she wasn't really there, but he liked to believe that she was looking over him. They had seen so much together. Everyone who graduated from the academy with them had been killed or changed into something or someone unrecognizable. There were even some that they both would swear that they knew and had vivid memories of, but didn't exist in the official database or on any of the worlds they had revisited. So he kept her close, real or not. Gabriel left the Council, cautiously knowing full well that they were all sitting there with them debating the fate of the multiverse. In some versions of reality, they stayed talking forever as they crumbled, each one of them unwilling to concede their point. In their time on the Council, Gabriel made their fair share of enemies, and the others were willing to go far out of their way for revenge. They felt like they were a rogue because they sided with demands and issues of planet-wide safety. It would be wrong for angels to come against each other, and they would have to be cunning to do it across all para-realities at once, but they were coming. Gabriel could feel it in the backflow of all their futures. Many tendriling iterations made it through, and the quantum force of their death spiraled back. They didn't like it, but they could sense it, even though they didn't know from who or from where. All they knew was that they had to get away from the Council table as soon as possible, because the proximity gave them advantage on all of the thems. In the village, Terrence spotted the Mans. She was wildly out of place among the destitute humans. Imagine, a 6-foot-tall lizard. He almost felt bad for her. The journey Certain dragged her on, destroying her reputation. taking her far from her own home, leaving her stranded in the cold. He could see killing her would be an act of mercy. Gabriel formulated a plan. They knew the Chictus on Ahael had been unhappy with their life since the Jelvins founded Dornkep, draining the planet's resources to power the metropolis and treating them as if they were animals. It was true that the Chictus didn't have the same bipedal appearance that was common throughout the multiverse, but that didn't mean they lacked culture or the desire to be recognized as part of a community. The Furbtech threat was centered in that metropolis, and Gabriel felt that he could use the Chictus's unrest to bring it to a halt with one swift movement. Griffin landed the transversal in the lowest basement of the House of Kamatosho. "This is where I left her when I was sent out to do my dirty work," he says to Sarah Kay as they disembark. "You know your Furbtech solution was largely due to me, don't you? Even though I didn't want to be a part of what they were doing upstairs. It's madness. And those creatures, cute as they are a virus. They latch onto the mind and leach out everything that makes a person a person. We are who we are because of the choices we make. You more than anyone know that, Kay. If we lose that, what do we have?" Terrence's multiphasic deflector erupted around Ellen before she even saw the agent. He was disappointed he left his psionic familiar behind. The illusion would have been useful for his escape, but the mission was very impromptu. The man screamed as she flickered between herself, a bear-like man, half goat, and then ceased to exist. It's a good thing that planets will only realize I brought the Furbtech to them after they've been linked under its influence, Griffin says. I can't imagine what they'd do to me if they knew what I'd subjected them to. I mean, it wasn't me that sent the device after us on Savannah, but I was the one that brought it here into a central hub world with the technology to enhance the little creature's output and control. Don't you worry about what they're going to do if they ever find out what you've done? I only did what I had to do, and I always operated from the shadows. That's why I've succeeded while you've remained a field operative. Conversion is a key component to running something as far-reaching as the Bureau. Getting results, not taking credit. Making them think it's their idea and give them all the resources they need to carry it out. Then there's no one to blame but themselves. Every step they took was their choice. Leisure spots them as they enter the lobby. "Griff, thank the ancestors you're back." The agent turns to the Jelvin on crutches, who stands next to a human and a winged creature. Griffin's heart leaps into his throat. "She lives!" "Sequi," he says. But as he approaches, he sees that it isn't the Imogen that he knew. That this is something very similar but totally different. The uneasy currents of the multiverse swirl around him. "We're looking for her as well," Triton says. "Ever from a world that is no longer a world. We are drawn because her echo is so strong here, but all I see is the wreckage of her passing. She is displaced, sir. Without her at the center, everything falls into chaos." Certain smiles to himself, clawing his way through the snow to the village where he left Ellen to gather their supplies. He's glad for finally connecting to the highest version of himself. Finally, something will get done. Finally, he'll be able to destroy the Imogen who brought into his life all the pain and suffering he had experienced. "Where is she?" Griffin asked Leisure loudly, the Jelvins around the room cautiously reaching for their gloves. "I told you to keep her here until I get back." "I've been through a lot since we last saw each other," he responds, signaling to the others to stand down with an almost unnoticeable gesture that calms them. "I almost died because of an off-world interference. We've been on heightened security since then." "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Griffin smiles at Sarah Kay. She shakes her head with a look that tells the agent to proceed with caution. "I made you and your family wealthy," he says, turning back to the Jelvin. "You're the most powerful house in Dornkep. It went against my better judgment, but I did it so you would keep an eye on the creature that arrived with me. So where is she?" Leisure inclines his head with a slow diffidence. "You have restored honor to our house, Wolfson, and we couldn't have done it without the Kwai Mono. The other creature was dangerous. Temporal and quantal anomalies were constantly occurring. Our matron could no longer justify the risk. Neither could we justify the risk." "But where is she?" Griffin demands loudly, the Jelvins raising their gloves again. "She took the Kwaiutsu and left," Leisure says. "We were able to track her progress to the endless corridor. While we could give you her exact coordinates now, by the time you reach her, she could have exited into a nearly infinite number of worlds. If you move quickly, maybe you can catch her, but the statistics are not in your favor." Saki lost the Imogen in the hallway. It's not that they didn't know where she had gone, they just saw every possible path she took, which ended up being every single one. In order to pursue, they had to diminish their power, unfocus themselves, put one in every reality where the Imogen was. At least Gabriel and Triton were with them. The Central Agent lurked in the village, waiting for the unrecognizable creature to emerge. He didn't care that the villagers didn't understand what was going on or how it was going to affect them culturally. He had tracked his prey, and he wasn't going to leave until the mission was accomplished. Certain entered the firelight, and one of the villagers approached him, speaking in hushed tones. While Terrence didn't think it was possible, he saw sorrow cross Alec's face when he got the news of the lizard's erasure. Without waiting to hear any more, he leapt into the sky and disappeared into the cloudy night. 5. Screaming started outside, and Griffin turned to Sarah Kay, asking in all seriousness, "What did you do? I know they wanted you back, but an overt strike? That's unreal." Beniriel waves her gloved hand, bringing up the Furbtech feeds from 1,000 different perspectives as she sees the chicken octopus swarming the city, latching onto the creatures, their skin crackling with electricity as they drain the life from their victims. The Jelvin matron speaks to her glove. "Get ready. The Chictus breached the wall." Sarah Kay leaps into action, following the Jelvins running for the armory, ever close behind, and Griffin trying to keep up. The Jelvins raise the walls with their gloves, revealing large mech suits. "Someone hook me up," Ever yells, but the Jelvins just look at him and laugh. "What, you think I don't know how to drive one of those things? I can make them do backflips. They got jet propulsion boots? I can do Mach 6. He turns to Griffin and Sarah Kay as they arm themselves with tech wands. "Why can't I drive one?" "Don't worry," Griffin says, reading his wand's inscription. "They're not going to live long. They've got tech, but no combat training. Their philosophy is domination through intellect. All the real warriors died a millennia ago." The walls open and the mech-suited Jelvins march out into the pandemonium of the streets. The wolf-faced agent hands a Jelvin device to Ever, saying, "Be careful with this one. It merges all beings into amalgam, size and ferocity based on the mob consumed." Outside, the Jelvins begin firing indiscriminately into the crowd, taking chunks of skyscrapers and spraying the entrails of innocent bystanders everywhere. Griffin puts his hands to his forehead, looking at the floor before turning back to Sarah Kay. "Are you going to let us interfere, or are you still worried about a multidimensional incident here?" That's when they see them for the first time. Chictus. Millions of them. Draining the life from their victims and swarming over dead bodies. It was like an unstoppable wave, and the mech-suited Jelvins panic. Some trying to run, some trying to fight. They trip it over themselves and each other. The wall of Chictus enveloped them, electricity crackling as they're eaten alive. "Awful way to go," Griffin says. "But it looks like there's a couple of suits available. If we wait out this mob, we may be able to get out of here safely." Ever couldn't remain passive without thinking about the danger. He charged into the Chictus mob with nothing but agility and fists. Sarah Kay and Griffin watch in disbelief. They've never seen someone so dumb yet so brave. "He's a goner," the acting director of the CIB says. "Shame. Seemed like a good kid." But, surprisingly, the man held his own, swinging a chicken octopus by its tentacles, using it as a melee weapon against the others who crowd in. "In all my world jumping, I've never seen that technique before," she says in a tone akin to awe. She looks at Griffin. "We'd look like cowards ourselves if we didn't help." Moving like the trained agents they are, they raise their tech wands and advance on the mob. Sarah Kay fires acidic globules that disintegrate the flesh of their opponents, and her subordinate flicks liquid that freezes everything it touches. They stick close together while facing in opposite directions, thinning out the outer edge of the mob to keep the pressure off Ever. Have you ever considered a job in multiversal peacekeeping? She asked him when she and Griffin reached him. "You seem to have a knack for being able to handle yourself in tough situations." Ever doesn't respond, fear rising in him as another dense wave of Chictus approach. Griffin leaps onto a fallen mech suit, throwing corpses aside. "Help me get this clear so we can get it on its feet." Ever joins him, the body splattering to the ground. "We were only able to make headway because our attack was unexpected. Right before they died, they were able to communicate our behavior to the mob and we'll lose our edge. We're going to have to come up with something new to stay one step ahead of them. I don't like the alternative." The agent gets clearance, opening the cockpit and pulling the body out before taking a seat. "I'll power up and I'll help you two get into the other ones. Cover Sarah Kay." The mech suit lights up with a high-pitched whine, and Griffin starts throwing bodies directly into the oncoming horde with near-perfect precision, knocking down individuals and clusters. But it wasn't enough. Instead of diminishing their numbers, it seemed to cause more to crawl towards them out of the urban destruction. Sarah Kay's globules were hitting their marks, but the Chictus were getting better at calculating the arcs and evading them. As Ever began to smell the electricity crackling around their bodies, Griffin grabbed them with the mech-suited hands, placing both of them in their own suits, and they power up before letting a huge sigh of relief. "We need to do something novel fast or they'll overwhelm us," Griffin says over the comms. They fire artillery, but after only a couple shots from each cannon, the Chictus have swarmed the ports, sacrificing their bodies to jam them and saving their brood. Ever tries to stomp his way through the mass, but the chicken octopuses glom up on his feet, making the weight too great to lift. He can feel them probing his mind from the outside of the suit, causing him to become empty of all his thoughts and surrendering. "Pull yourself together," Griffin yells, shaking Ever from his stupor. "The Illic respected you, and you're going to buckle under a psychic assault? Pitiful." The agent's words cut him deeply. He could feel his universe-crushing anger rising in him, overpowering the Chictus' force. The man struggles to his feet, grabbing the suits of the other two before powering his jump boots to launch them all into the sky. They hurtled through the stratosphere and into space, a trail of bodies behind them. They float among the stars, and the wolf-faced agent burst out laughing. "Wow, I've come up with some great plans in my time, but that was something else altogether. Kay, we have to sign him up." "Yeah, I don't think I would have found such an elegant solution," Sarah Kay says. "The oxygen in our tanks won't last. We have to get to the Stargate before we suffocate." The acting director grabs their suits, firing her jump boots to glide them toward the glimmering station. "Are you making fun of me?" Ever demands, trying to wiggle free. "Because I'm really good at reading people, and I don't want to go anywhere with people who think it's okay to mock me to my face." He fires his boots to try to escape, but Sarah Kay doesn't let him go, using his additional thrust to move them more quickly towards the station. "Let me go. I've survived long enough on my own. I'll be fine." "Easy, man," Griffin says. "I remember being just like you. A young man lost in the multiverse. I didn't know or trust anyone, but I had an unusual way of seeing the world, and that gave me a survival instinct. Dr. Klee and I got caught up in a lap where two universes collided, and the Bureau agents were dispatched to sort out the mess. I didn't know what to make of it then. Superpowered men in black. It's hard to trust what you don't understand, but I found a force of order in this chaotic reality of ours." 6. Sebastian didn't know what to make of the fact that he was being ushered into the dimly lit faculty area of the Bureau's training center. The tiny stimps fluttered around Flockhart's head as the otter entered, the heads of the Grayley and Fisher cyborgs turning to him at once. They were distinct from each other, with their own agendas and personalities, but he'd never been able to tell them apart. "Good, you made it," the headmaster croaked, gesturing to his seat. "The director is missing. We need your help." The center of the table lights up with a hologram showing Connie in a standard training procedure. Suddenly the image flickers and the course changes along with every creature working the drill. Sebastian looks at Flockhart, but the ancient man shakes his head. There's no glitch in the footage. That trainee is bending reality around her. Connie was aware she was flicking through realities like TV channels. She wasn't sure where the power came from, but she liked it. As long as the CIB didn't want to stop her, they were welcome to stay in power. She'd learned everything they could teach her, and maybe she'd assist them, but she wanted them to know the era of calling the shots was over. Interestingly, those who she summoned seemed totally unaware of the fact that they had just arrived. As she casually quizzed them, they had elaborate histories that justified their existence as if they had always been there. But she had memories of every adjustment. Although after a few months of big and small changes, everything was getting a little muddy. The faces were becoming blurred. It was fascinating to notice how everything seemed to affect everything else. By simply removing one of the instructors she didn't like, for instance, the layout of the campus shifted. By changing what they had for lunch, her training schedule had been rearranged. The possibilities were endless, and while she decided that she wanted to be more careful, she didn't care about how many worlds came and go. She was going to make it what she wanted it to be. She had been rejected since birth, and now she would own the world. "We have to approach cautiously," Flockhart says to the otter. "She can eraser you by willing it. The fact that you're still around says that she values you, so we'll use that." "Aren't there temporal dampeners in this place?" Sebastian asks, as a way to stall. "Yeah, we got 'em," the headmaster asks. "But that's just it. They're dampeners. Anything can be overridden with enough force, and believe me, she's putting out a lot of force. In fact, we're still unaware of how much she's affecting because of all the ripples are so far-reaching and so frequently that they're creating waves of interference. Temporal dampeners are designed to stop a force expanding from our universe or a quantum wave headed in. This is like shaking pop rocks inside a can of soda pop." The old man smiled, self-deprecating. "Does that make sense? Do they have soda on your world?"
Shaking his head, Sebastian imagines the strange universe where Flockhart is from. It's just as well, the Ancient One says. Since you don't know what's ahead, you have no way of being scared, and that'll be your defense. If we don't do something soon, we won't be around to do something. And even if she begins to suspect that we're doing something, well, we won't ever know because we'll simply get replaced. The other knocks on the door to Connie's dorm. She lived alone because her roommates kept washing out of the program. Although thinking about it, he realized that may have been less random than he had previously believed. The cadet opens the door with a smile. "Hey," Sebastian says. "I just got back from mission. How you doing?" Surprisingly, Connie throws her arms around him. "I've been great. I was really hoping you'd come by. I've missed you so much." It occurred to the agent that this wasn't by chance. Even if the faculty hadn't realized it, sending him here was playing right into her hand. He wondered how far her influence reached and how much control he even had over his own thoughts and actions. He wasn't sure how much she knew, but he knew that if he was going to survive, he was going to have to cooperate with her. 7. Sakan stares at the dingo's smoldering body, wondering where she could go. It was strange for her to be at a loss of a plan. She had faced much adversity in her youth, freeing her people from the Menisker, but she had her father's strength and wisdom to rely on. There she knew her enemy. Here she was out of her element. She had hoped that the god from a distant world could help her, but there he lay, a heap of ashes. Before routing their signal through 5A_K0N, CAK_BRD spread his mind link through Sneersbury, Sniddick, and Snooty before spilling into the Sneeze Jelly and Fisher. Their production of the No1L_KAN spread across the planet, and the units were being shipped the moment the last bolt was tightened. They acted as focus points for every landmass they stood on, sending everything back to the Emperor to analyze. He had so many billions of bits of information passing through his mind per nanosecond, he was no longer capable of caring for himself. He had to be bathed, fed, and exercised by his multitude of servants. He was so busy running worlds, he no longer knew who he was. The more Connie learned about what the Bureau did for the central government, the more she wanted to put it to an end. They could have stopped Melthius' reign of terror on Trenton Brandswank if they wanted to, but they decided to turn a blind eye, letting him and Sparrow destroy her people because they were considered insignificant. She had spent days reading up on all the hell worlds, like Yetzirah and a multitude of others that had not only tortured her, but generation after generation of others. The CIB could have stepped into those worlds, set up their own governments, relieved the suffering of the people there, but they decided to let them get worse, exploiting the residents that lived there for their own entertainment and resources. When they had located the source of all chaos throughout the multiverse, they didn't try to destroy its world, collapsing the deep fissure that it had crawled out of. They tried to capture and manipulate it, unsettling all the worlds in the process. Connie would end it all for them. Her will began bending reality toward this goal. She would erase her opposition. She wasn't used to having friends. She had always been considered a freak. Gertie was the closest thing she had had to a friend, but even that had always been a competition between the two of them. She didn't know why she trusted the otter. There was something about him that told her that he didn't have a bad bone in his body, and he was trying to bring peace back to the universes, even as passive as he was. Candel crawls out from a bunker below the house of Kamatosho to explore the rubble that was once the city of Dornkep. The Chick Disc not only decimated the citizens' minds, but in the battle that ensued, they caused so much mayhem that rebuilding would take centuries. They left people from all corners of the multiverse broken and confused, not knowing their own names, much less where they were. To be honest, though, this had been the opportunity that Candel had been waiting for. He knew reality behaved like a rushing river. You could never contain it, only guide it, and he intended to be that guide. Destruction was the perfect opportunity to make that reality that he wanted. Something moved, catching the Jelvin's attention, and he put his hand to his glove. He smiled, seeing his cousin Lejimir filthy and digging through the garbage of the destroyed streets. The disheveled Jelvin drags tubes of rotting food to his kinsfolk, setting it at his feet and bowing low. "This is the most that I can find, master, but have mercy. I will find more. Rest assured, I can always find more. Take and eat. I will wait. Changes throughout the multiverse were rapid, without an epicenter coming from every reality at once. Marilyn had never seen anything like it. There were, however, a few places she could pinpoint which remained solid, ancient islands in the tumultuous ocean. San Lu, a sage from her world, would say, those unchanged by chaos are likely the cause. She gathered a team, zeroing in to eliminate the closest target. They descend into the hell world of Surma. Captain Ryan fit the Dolphin Warriors team with their own gel suits. The slime that covers this world is sentient and is hoping to use you as its host. It will latch onto you and grow rapidly. We're going to have to decontaminate everything on our way back, or it'll spread through the CIB, Central, and every agent coming and going. A single spore will devastate an entire planet, so be vigilant. I've also equipped each suit with a temporal dampener so we don't lose ourselves in the quantum storm. He slaps on his chest piece and the goose spreads over his body. It'll feel strange, but breathe normally. The suit is balanced for your O2 levels. In a dark corner of Lysander's morgue, Certain reaches into the Emperor's bustling mind, pushing him to find a Ferb tech on one of the occupied worlds. We must control it, and it cannot wait any longer, Certain whispers across the multiverse. The Emperor's mind link merges with all the creatures the adorable owl-like hamsters have influence over, and Certain begins manipulating everyone under their control. Kings, tribal leaders, politicians were suddenly under the Illic's command on countless worlds, each being fed by the Furbtek's delusion of grandeur. Unlike the brute force of the Emperor's network and manual control of a creature's will, which had led to the Null1L_KAN unit's massive amount of computing, now they were given the illusion of choice, but they were being influenced to make the choices that moved them away from self-preservation, instead causing them to desire to expand their mind lake. Where there had been resistance before, agents were dispatched carrying the adorable owl-like hamsters, causing continents and whole planets to fall under their sway. There were very few creatures who were genetically capable of resisting the charm of the Furbtek, which gave them front-row seats to the horror show that was their family and friends turning to something worse than the mindless drones. They could think, act, and feel, but everything that used to be important to them suddenly wasn't, their personalities being unified into one big, seemingly happy community that left them out. She knew they were coming, just like she had known the dingo was coming, and like the dingo, Sakan knew they were approaching through the worst possible world. That's not what she wanted from them, but she had to wait. She wasn't smart enough, fast enough, or strong enough to take on the Sphinxes. She found it ironic that even though she had always been looked to as the leader of her people, when everything was stripped away from her, she had to depend on the help from strangers in strange worlds. It was humbling to be in such a place, but the only other option she had was certain death, so she waited, knowing that they were slogging their way through hell for her. As Sequoia flew down the infinite hallway, she felt the small part of herself entering every door. She had dreamed of every world, every creature who lived there, and everything that could ever happen to them. What happened was up to them, but every possibility was available. She knew that her presence was changing them. Some rebelled, some rejoiced, but she left that up to them. She wouldn't force them to choose. Her life had been lonely. At first she was nothing. Then she thought herself into existence, and from then she simply was. For the longest time there was absolutely nothing besides her. She was just her in a void, and in that she was content. Although, realistically speaking, at the time there was no such thing as time, she began to realize that, while she was complete in herself, there was so much else that could be. She began to dream up all the things in their infinite variations. She gave her creations the ability to create like her and build and to explore their possibilities. She gave them something that she could never have, equals. Other creatures who could understand their point of view, who work beside them, who they could love and be loved by. And then she gave them a driving force that she never had, death, limiting their time to accomplish whatever they desired, constantly reminding them that the end was near so they had no time to waste in getting it. She was pained to see both of her gifts being despised and feared. Her creations, instead of coming together to accomplish great things that they were capable of, were instead turning against each other, jealously guarding their own creations from their peers so that they would be the only ones to receive the benefit of them. They fought against death. seeking to prolong their lives indefinitely, but not attempting to do anything more with them or mourning those who were lost, regardless of how much they had accomplished with their time. Tsukui knew each of her creations intimately, why they were, how they functioned, but they were so unlike her in many ways. She couldn't understand why her gifts were so misused. Even though she was all powerful, they were the only two things that she couldn't have for herself. That's why she devised for them to discover her and seek her out. She was aware that some would try to destroy her and others would try to manipulate her into serving their selfish desires, but she was going to use both of those desires to reach out to those who were looking to understand her. By stepping into those worlds, she hoped that they would gain a proper perspective of themselves. They were teeny in comparison to her. They were lucky to have each other. By understanding her plight, she hoped they would begin to value each other, grasping their short lives as a challenge to not waste a single moment. Even though every universe was so vastly different from others, each of them had fallen into the exact same trap. They fixated on their own realities, forgetting how to be awestruck by the wonder of the world exploding all around them. It's true, in a moment she could wipe them all out, collapsing everything back into the void, but in each world she inhabited, she held back, allowing them only to see a part of her that they could handle, yet showing them enough to dazzle them, to wake them up from the dream that they had created for themselves. The dream that she had created for them was spectacular, but they kept falling for their own delusions of grandeur, thinking that somehow by controlling others around them they could defeat their own deaths. But it was coming for them all of them but her. At the end of their lives, they would wake up and they would realize the whole thing was her dream, and they were part of something much bigger than themselves. For those creatures who desired only to make themselves great, the feeling was unbearable, but those who got it, using their lives successfully, cherishing one another with the time they had, it was great joy. Immediately after reaching Ohio's Stargate, Sarah Kay contacts Central HQ. "I want you to shut down the Furbtech project," she says to Sarah. "It's out of control and it's my fault. Take a look at my encrypted Clio logs if you need to see what I've done." "We can't stop it," he says, his eyes growing wide as he reviews her data. "It's overridden all its own safety protocols. The creatures are collectively off their leash." Slowly, Sakan walks towards the Sphinxes, so weighed down by her failure that she's unable to fly. She's aware that it was suicide, but she didn't feel like she had any options. The longer she continued to exist, the more creatures she would draw to her and die because of her. Her entire life had been pain, but she could see past it on a world where she could control it. But here, she had no ability beyond her claws and wings, and she could see how the Dingo God was in a better place than she was. But as she approached the Sphinxes, their eyes opened, not looking at her, but looking at the light that formed between their paws, where a crew of slime-covered creatures burst out from, shouting. "You're going to want to get out of here," Sarah Kay says to Griffin. "They've quantangulated our location and are dispatching agents to bring us both in." "I know the protocol," the wolf-faced agent smiles at his friend. "Are you sure you don't want to come with us? I want you to see her with your own eyes. She's amazing." The acting director shakes her head. "I have to face what I've done and, hopefully, put the Furbtech back in their cages. I was blinded by ambition. This excursion opened my eyes. We're so far removed from the multiverse on Central, it's easy to lose touch." Sarah Kay reaches for Griffin, pulling him in for a hug. "Please don't get killed." They can hear the airlocks unlatch and boots approaching on the metal flooring, and Everett clears his throat. "Not to break the moment, but we should probably get going." The pair holds onto each other for a moment longer until a smoke grenade hits the floor, filling the room with a cloud. "Suit up," Griffin says to the young man from the collapsed universe. They run for the airlock, the wolf only glancing back once. Through CAK_BRD, Certain begins an aggressive expansion of the hyper-networked Furbtech. On Ravenous, the Corvid commanders begin a vigilant search for everyone who wouldn't submit, using their mutations to convince them to accept the adorable creatures, while the hawkbills of Duhuving simply shrugged and adopted their new fate the same way as they had slowly crawled toward their own world's destruction. As the gel-suited alien poses his own riddle to the Sphinxes, the slime on him slides off, creeping along the sand. The dolphin and his crew tries to sneak over to Sakan, but the guardians of the gate roar, freezing her in her steps. Speaking in an ancient tongue, Kaplan soothes the colossal beast, and they settle back into their banter. Unnoticed, the slime spreads, gently touching Sakan's foot and wrapping itself up her leg, imperceptibly draining the life from her body. The Sphinxes bow to the tiny Sneersbarian, allowing him and his crew to step away from the lighted portal. Marilyn approaches the Illic, speaking the creature's language through her suit's translator. "You're not the Imogen." The dolphin warrior smiles amusedly, looking at the quantidata on her suit's HUD. "Although to the naked eye you two would pass as the same, there are a number of subatomic differences." Agent Lau breathed a sigh of relief. She was a distinguished fighter, but she had no desire to take on an opponent who was older than the multiverse. She survived many battles by knowing when she couldn't win. Griffin and Ever maxed their jump boots, not caring about fuel conservation until they hit Ahael's atmosphere, where they free fell like comets, breaking the sound barrier. If they had hoped to escape the notice of the people below, they failed miserably. Their thrusters helped them descend through the dense jungle, where they were immediately surrounded by the natives. Ever puts up his hands. "We don't want any trouble." To say Kendall was prepared to rebuild his family's legacy was an understatement. He knew Dorn Kep was teetering on the edge of destruction, and like all empires, it was only a matter of time before it fell. So he watched and waited, noting the telltale signs. The vast difference between life inside the city and those who lived in huts outside, the bloated bureaucracy causing and perpetuating infighting between ancestral houses, his failure to educate the younger generations, making them reliant on the elders but unable to take their place when they fell ill, unable to do the work because of advancing years. His cousins laughed at him over pints, but he was the one who was laughing now. Sebastian did what he did best, looking friendly on the surface as he schemed underneath. Connie was unlike any species he knew on his homeworld, but below her furless skin he sensed behavior that he had only seen in Karns. She was hungry, driven by her sense of strength and desire to dominate others. Even though the collars they had worn on Sabania had curbed their bloodlust, it never got rid of their worldviews. As an Arbian, he understood how banding together with the strongest member of your group meant a larger chance of survival. His instinct was to be loyal to those who had taken him. They had trained him in their ideals, vetting him, and he'd become responsible for others. But as Connie exposed their deep secrets to him, he realized the CIB was rotten at its core. Their goal wasn't to create peace throughout the multiverse. Their goal was to maintain enough chaos to exploit its destructive nature for themselves. Someone like Connie was an inevitability. You do enough bad to enough people, and eventually one of them was going to come for you. She was like a force to be reckoned with. As she talked, Sebastian could see reality bending around her. With each shared exploit, he noticed the signs of her room slowly expand. When Connie listed the numerous crimes that the central government, and the CIB specifically, committed in the name of peace, the government's toppled, people assassinated, species exterminated, the other watched the campus shift her room into the center of it all. Suddenly, there was no difference between CAK_BRD, his extended network, the FERBTech cohesion field, and Certain in the Morgue. They were one creature, straddling multiple realities with many, many bodies. Their combined intention to dominate could not be satiated. They conquered each world with sickening precision, only making them hungrier for more. Lost in that vast space of mind, Certain failed to notice that far from creating the peace of nothingness that he had sought, relief from the memories of those that had tortured him and his people, he was becoming the terror who inflicted his own suffering on others, his pain blinding him to everything but his own conquest. Her experiences on every world Sakan had been on since she left Illic made her wary of the Dolphin Warrior. But as the agent spoke to her in her own language, she began to understand her hopeless situation. There was no other way off this planet. She could choose to stay, but she would forever be far from her people. She would die in an unknown world, unmourned. Marilyn offered aid. They only needed a small favor. Professor Flockhart knocks before entering, swarmed by stimp assistants. "Excuse me, Headmaster Tong," he says meekly. "The cadets are waiting for your address." Connie rises, gesturing for Sebastian to follow. They wind through the hallways completely foreign to the Otter, ending in a ballroom that never existed. The murmuring dies down as they enter, Connie approaching the podium. "I want you to look around. Each of you has been handpicked from the most important mission in the multiverse." The Outer feels sick as he realizes he's failed his mission. Dr. Mega and his team of heroes from Dr. Mega and his team for I think there's a plane coming. Dr. Mega and his team of heroes were from Rethro, along with a consortium of six-armed psychic Chuntuks from Lijaj and a host of dark demonic from Demoj, and so many others who had been lost, rejected, or forgotten, all now hungry for their revenge. In the worlds we rule, no one will be forgotten. Everyone will have their say and be heard. We're opposing the Central Bureau and its practices because all they've done in We're opposing Central Bureau and its practices because all they've done in secret on the worlds they occupy. They must be brought down, and the only way we can do it is from within Central's headquarters. You will all be trained as agents for as long as it takes, and when you're ready, you'll be assigned like any other agent. In any instance that you can remove someone not working for us, either by glass cubing or by any other method, do it. So get to know each other well. Develop your signs and countersigns so you can indoctrinate others. If you receive opposition, squelch it by any means necessary. Your lives are no longer your own. If you fall, know that your compatriots will avenge you and carry on our mission. We strive to free every known world within the multiverse, and we strive to free every known world within the multiverse and any others we may discover. We're destroying the illusion of freedom to give real, terrifying freedom to anyone who desires it. True freedom comes from each individual taking responsibility for their own actions in the face of all opposition. You are the first generation of a long legacy of free peoples, free to thrive, free to rule, free to make your own mistakes, and free to give freedom to others. You'll be feared and loved. You'll be feared and loved. Just in case the plane. If there's any such thing as joy in this malevolent group of individuals, Sebastian saw it, and it made him sick to think about the things they'd planned to do with the power being handed to them. He went along with them, though, being just one in a multitude. Since he was the most experienced with the Bureau, Connie put him in charge of their training curriculum, setting up courses and drills to train them in their upcoming war. He subtly tried to undermine them over the months, giving them false information and instilling tells to warn those on the outside that these agents were working toward a different, more violent end, but he had no way of knowing if any of his efforts... He subtly tried to undermine them over the months, giving them false information and instilling tells to warn those on the outside that these agents were working toward a different, more violent end, but he had no way of knowing if any of his efforts were effective or if they were going to be too subtle that even a trained agent would overlook them as the quirks of this graduating class. He knew that he only had one shot at it because once they'd trained up a teaching corps, he'd be put on a mission and those teachers would do what they thought best. He couldn't imagine what other dregs would be dug up as they explored the darkest reaches of the multiverse for more of their kind. If it kept going like this, the evil ones would find ones more evil than themselves, and those in turn, ones even more evil, and on and on and on. He shuddered. But as much as Sebastian wanted to give up and out the operation to the Bureau, he didn't instead... But as much as Sebastian wanted to give up and out the operation to the Bureau, he didn't. Instead pushing forward, knowing that if Connie caught on to his covert operation, that he wouldn't be around long enough to make a second mistake. He stayed the course to keep an evil, mustachioed version of himself from stepping in to take over. God, that joke's so dumb. He admired her, though. She understood how to exploit the hurt in others. One would never expect that multiple species of severely exploited individuals would come together, living together for one particular purpose, but Connie got them to recognize their painful differences aligned them for a higher goal. The Outer could only chalk it up to her ability to manipulate them to her will, because how else could he explain it? The question always raised the fur on the back of his neck. What made him any different? The wolf-faced agent peeps out of his hotel room and down the spiraling ramp, trying to spy anyone he knows in the lobby. They're all new agents all the time, he says to Ever. We have to be careful. There's new agents all the time, he says to Ever. We have to be careful. Kay stalled as much as she can, but they're putting our quantum signatures in everyone's world book. It's bad, my man. People turn so quickly. Once they brand you as a traitor, you're not far from being glass cubed. We don't even know how often it happens either, because afterwards it's like they never existed. She's something else, Griffin's young companion says in a tone akin to adoration. Don't get any ideas, the rogue agent replies to the moon-eyed boy. She just slides along those baraka. You think she's looking out for you, and then you find out her real motives. I wouldn't be surprised if we're actually playing right into her plan right now. You don't believe that, do you? She's your friend, and clearly hoping for more. We graduated together, yet she's the CIB's director. She's good at getting noticed, Griffin says. You're saying what she wants you to see. She knows what you're capable of. She probably doesn't have plans for you yet, but she wants me to officially train you as a secret weapon. He snaps his fingers. That's it. Surprised it took me so long. What if I don't want to work for her, Ever asks. I'm free to do what I want. His companion smiles, turning back to the door. Keep thinking that, kid. Sooner or later, you're going to realize that we're moved by massive forces beyond our control. I crush my universe around me by the sheer force of my will, he objects loudly. So I've heard. But firstly, it's gone. There's no evidence that it ever existed. And secondly, who gave you that ability? Did you pick it for yourself? Wasn't it just some random chance that it was you and not someone else? The fact that you exist at all is equally a fluke. But she needs you, the wolf continues. I think she thinks we all do. The net she's cast to capture a force beyond her control has turned on her. We're all in danger. If I know her like I think I do, and believe me, I do, Griffin says to Ever, she's going to use her agents and push us in a place we need to be to pull the plug on the Furbtech if it ever becomes too dire. Ever starts to object, but the agent raises his paw. Just accept it. You have the power to save the multiverse, son. Just be happy that you're useful to her. Well, she can pick someone else, the young man says, pushing the door open and heading down the ramp. Griffin tries to grab him, but retreats before exposing himself. No one controls me. Not you, not her. No one on my world or any other world. Get back here, the wolf hisses from the shadows, but Ever sneers, ignoring him. I don't want to be a part of a multi-dimensional shadow government, Griffin, and I don't need you looking after me. I grew up on the streets of Kunrun, and I've fended for myself since I could walk. This is plain. You probably can't hear it. No one was there for me, and anyone who said they were was looking to get something from me. Halfway to the lobby, and he's already caused the hubbub to die down as they try to catch sight of this loud newcomer. Are agents looking for us? Bring them on. I'll show them that I'm not to be messed with. I don't need you or them. I'm fine on my own. He reaches the lobby and realizes he's gotten everyone's attention. I'll crush you all under the force of my will. The building and everything in it trembles, imperceptibly at first, but steadily increasing as Ever stands looking at the crowd. An olive-skinned man from Capricorn slips up unnoticed, putting a needle to the young man's throat. I wouldn't, he says softly. Griffin's multiphasic deflector whines, warming up in the Capricorn agent's back. Do you like being you? He asks in a low tone. Would you be more effective as a Geminis? Lower the needle before we have to find out. The agent complies and the wolf goes on. You seem surprised. Your charts didn't tell you I was going to intervene today? Pity. It did, the agent replies, but we're destined into our roles. It cannot be changed. The building ceases trembling, and Griffin nods to Ever. Get back to our room and get on your mech suit. We need to go, or we're going to be up to our elbows in these creeps. You're not going to be able to stop us, Griffin, the captain says calmly. We have personnel in every corner of every world. You showing your face here has only alerted the dozen agents still undercover. They're coming for you and won't stop until you're recaptured. Stepping in was the right choice, the wolf says, lowering his disruptor as he eases back to the ramp. You saved us, and the multiverse's second most iconic You saved us, and the multiverse's second most iconic intersection. You will receive high commendation for your actions. But leave it at that. The boy and I need very little to survive. We can slip through world after world without leaving a trace. It'll be like chasing a vapor. Pass on the warning. The next agent won't be so lucky. A horrifying 8-armed creature with advanced cybernetic enhancements for a head, wearing a pinstripe suit, phase shifts from the shadows near the ramp, grabbing Griffin. The wolf agent doesn't hesitate, blasting his deflector into the creature's belly, causing it to flicker between a large chicken, a heap of tiny octopus, and The wolf agent doesn't hesitate, blasting his deflector into the creature's belly, causing it to flicker between a large chicken and a heap of tiny octopuses. The wolf agent doesn't hesitate, blasting his deflector into the creature's belly, causing it to flicker between a large chicken and a heap of tiny octopuses before disappearing with a tiny pop. I wrote your world book, he says. I know your tactics. A voice booms over the PA. Central agents are banned from the Phoenix Club. Griffin roars with laughter. Look what you did. You're super... Griffin roars with laughter. Look what you did. Your supervisors are going to be so unhappy with you. You've not only lost the second biggest shortcut in the multiverse, you also lost a vital source of information from all corners of the known worlds. Agents discovered in this establishment, while the government is under review, will be prosecuted to the fullest by the League of Planets interventional laws, the PA continues. You have until the announcement's conclusion to vacate the premises. Everett tears through one of the doors leading from Ahael in his mech suit. You're going to suit up or what? Because I don't think that announcement's going to hold them off. They've got more than an announcement, the wolf-face agent says. They've got more than that announcement, the wolf-face agent says. If we don't leave, we'll have to meet Greg, and he's definitely not someone you want to make mad. Isn't Sarah Kay going to be forced to do something now that you killed one of her agents? Ever asks as Griffin climbs into a mech suit. She can't possibly be on our side. I didn't kill an agent, Griffin says innocently. That suited Polypolis never existed. What are you talking about? Ever says as they step onto the ramp clogged with retreating agents. I saw you shoot it. I heard the pop. Why the announcement if nothing happened? You can try to live in your own fantasy, but I know what I saw. Griffin grabs a narrow-eyed agent in soft clothes who just exited their own hotel room and Ever helps the wolf throw the man into the lobby below. They enter their victim's room, locking the door behind them, and Griffin shakes his head sadly. I'm not saying that I'm not guilty for what happened. I'm trying to show you what it looks like from Central's perspective. He was erased. I didn't end his existence. I made it so he's never existed at all. They were planning to do that to us too before he escaped. 8. As a Central agent, Terrence was supposed to be invisible until absolutely necessary, and then do everything to make sure that he didn't openly disrupt a planet's world politics. He didn't have time for all that, though. He wanted to catch Certain before he got any further. The Alec was worse than just a defector against the agency and their government. He was a traitor against all life everywhere, even if they had no idea who he was or what he was doing. If the reports were to be believed, Certain was spreading his control over 80% of the multiverse, and Terrence could no longer remain covert. The slime grew on the Hell World, fed on its quanta, and the team slothed through it in their gel sleuths. Marilyn explains their problem to Sakan. Her uncle lived, and there was little in the multiverse that could stop him. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, the Dolphin Warrior says. His need for control created an agent of chaos. Sebastian had to know. Did he have control over his own actions, or was he being puppeted by forces in the multiverse bigger than himself? When he was away from Connie, he loathed the thought of her, but he continued training her recruits, even feeling sorry for her when they finally met face to face. He couldn't understand it. When he heard her voice and looked at her, he couldn't help but try to protect her from every evil, only shaking free when he left her presence. The first poison match had shipped to Central, and so far no one had suspected a thing. He had trained them well. But would they last once they left Connie's sway, or would they crumble under the pressure of their own egos? Really, how is that any different than what Central was already doing? Sebastian laughed to himself. Sure, they had one goal of maintaining order, but every agent was left to figure out for themselves what they look like and how to execute it in the heat of the moment. Afterwards, they'd be graded or upbraided for their behavior. It was the threat of violence, disbarment, or loss of support that kept agents on track, and Connie had that over her own agents as well to the nth degree. They'd be gone if they crossed her, and no one would know that they were ever there, retroactively replaced, the mission going on with only the very astute questioning their dreamlike memories as they slowly faded. Does anyone have control over their own lives, or was the fear of reprisal what even the Imogen used against them? Whatever goes up must come down. Physical, mental, and social physics kept them accountable to the great originator. Certain's body lay in the morgue unnoticed, barely breathing, his mind expanding further than any created being had ever reached, all the while absorbing the knowledge and experiences of the races he was consuming. The Lysander diners came upon him by accident as they were moving their patrons' sarcophagi for yearly cleaning. It was after a day of intense training that Sarah Kay reached out to the Otter in Cuba Knoll. "How soon can you get to Central?" Her tone sounded casual, but on reflection in the transverser, he realized that it was too casual. She hadn't mentioned a mission, just the question, what could she possibly want? Was she suspicious? Was she aware of the anomalies radiating from Connie? Would she try to intervene, setting herself against the reality-shifting force? Would any of them survive? As his ship set down, Sebastian realized he was caught, but the CIB had to be stopped, and he would see it through. "We pull her out of the hell world she got herself into, and this is how she treats us," Sarah Kay fumes, the Otter sitting in her office. The acting director reads his expression. "No need to act surprised. Our Templar dampeners are firmly in place. We're well aware of the changes occurring at the Academy, and it needs to stop. Somehow you're the only remaining constant in that microcosm, which is why we had to pull you out. You held up well, but we didn't know how much longer you had before she snaps. How is that all that quanta channeled to her and not me?" Her last sentence slipped out unintentionally, and Sarah Kay seemed to shock even herself. "You must be aware of how interrelated we are. Me, her, the Imogen. The creature's power should diffuse evenly, but somehow that little girl from an unknown corner of the multiverse is drawing it all to herself. She doesn't deserve it. I do. I've been the one working my way up in the ranks, trying to make change, and a puny usurper won't take that from me." "Activate the flamethrowers," Marilyn says to her team, and they ignite the sermon that covered their transverser while they were gone. "I want you to draw him to you," the Dolphin Warrior says to Sakan over their intercom. "His pain is pushing him to make the multiverse his own personal hell world, and only his erasure will reverse it." "Come with me," Sarah Kay says to the Otter. "I'm about to show you something that only top agents get to see. It's a breach of protocol, but it'll do you good." The acting director guides Sebastian through a series of back hallways to a door marked CL1 Null. She opens it with a voice and retinal scan. The two of them enter a huge chamber so tall the ceiling is lost in darkness, walking across a clear floor above a bottomless chasm. CL1 Null show us the potentiality of action based on the trajectory of a creature 6711235612 from 187-54, currently on world 142-41. The four-dimensional rug throws them to the floor. The sight was dizzying, extending for eternity both behind them and in front. Sebastian was drenched in sweat, trying not to puke. Before them was a dark circling mass with Connie at the center, tying the rug into a knot. Instead of her actions leading outwards to weave into the life of all others like every other strand did, she instead was pulling all of reality toward her, making the knot denser and denser. She doesn't know what to do with the power she's got, Sarah Kay scoffs. If it was mine, like it's supposed to be, I would be the master weaver, keeping things organized and neat. Not like this. The Mononians attacked the Transverser as soon as it appeared in their waters, salt-powered weapons rocking Maryland's crew. Sakan was shocked at the quick reality jump. She had only previously known pre-made passages. We're outside our jurisdiction, but it's okay. We're not going back to Central, the Dolphin says. Everyone's turning against me, Sebastian, Sarah Kay says, floating on their backs through the complexity of other people's choices. My best agents, friends I've known for years, are abandoning me, like rodents from a sinking ship. No offense. The editor tries to figure out how that could be offensive to him, but the acting director moves on. We've reached the most pivotal moment that has ever existed in the history of every universe everywhere, and instead of people staying to do their jobs, they're just gone, leaving me to pick up the pieces and try to make it work. But don't worry, my furry friend, she says, patting his paw. They're going to pay. They won't even see it coming. You can't escape fate that is set up to consume us all. It's coming. Unless I do something, it's coming. Not many people have seen what you're seeing. They sense it, I'm sure. They're feeling it in their bones, but you and I, we know. We've seen it coming. But every world has passed away, and it's only going to be you and I in the new reality. Greg was on him as soon as he entered the Phoenix Club, the shambling mound of shapes surrounding Terrence with shrieks that defied logic. The agent's multiversal translator made out a few words, but mainly banned. Greg, you know me, he said, applying psychic force to the abstract mind driving the mound. We go way back. The shrieking continued, but Terrence's grip didn't give up. I need some info. It's a matter of life and death for us all. Nothing. Greg was squeezing him back into the room he'd just come out of. Fine, I'm leaving, but I expect an apology once I get reinstated. The diners had no idea what to do with certain. He was alive, but what was he? Where had he come from? Lilik was in no position to tell them, being far from his body. They wanted to help. It was their duty. So they hooked him up to the machine that held the minds of everyone on their planet. The virtual world within their world. The more Sebastian stopped trying to understand the weave of the rug, the more it made sense to him. He relaxed into its completeness, letting it wash over him. While his mind was unable to comprehend all the events and potential events flowing past him, his essence was able to intuit the process, aware that this was something he had always been aware of but had never had the tools to describe. He let his mind wander down the interwoven threads out of the knot that Connie formed until he found himself in the mind-boggling tapestry and traced his line back through everything he had experienced with Central. He came unexpectedly on a knot of his own timeline, seeing where he had arrived here by quite a different path than he expected, with a different name and a different history than he had remembered. He found Sebastian, whose life had been cut short because of his questioning. He found a young otter that had doubted the integrity of the Bureau, and now he understood why. The discovery disturbed him deeply, shaking him to his core, and he looked through the other threads of agents he knew, good people who were doing their best to maintain the order in the multiverse. Time and time again, he saw these bizarre knots, moments where there was someone and their lives were taken over by a person from a reality very near their own. The most disturbing part was that life went on around them as if nothing had happened. Central was forcing their agents down the paths they decided were best for them, throwing away the lives of those who opposed them without even a glance back. Connie had been right. Sarah Kay does a handspring, landing gracefully on her high-heeled boots as the rug clicks off, leaving them in the large empty space. I want you to choose, Otter, she says, adjusting her skirt. Would you rather watch all of reality unravel around us, or are you going to serve me and the agency well and cause the knot she's forming to choke her? The Dolphin Warriors defected, Baradian says in a chorus of voices as they exit. Let her go, Sarah Kay says. She's the least of our worries. We'll send a glass cube unit after her win. She stops suddenly, her mouth falling open slightly as her memories crash into one another, canceling each other out. You came back, she gasps. Yes, ma'am, the angel replies, smiling slightly as he looks at reality from her limited perspective. It appears that Agent Gottlieb's self-appointed mission was successful. He knew he was alive, but he was also aware of many realities where he was a pile of ash. 11. Griffin and Evers step onto Captain Rand's ship in the middle of the mutiny, the alien pirates sword fighting each other. The wolf-faced agent hung back until he was sure of who was winning, and then he joined their side. He wasn't concerned with who was right, since that was a matter of perspective. He was more concerned with gaining safe passage. Their weapons and mech suits helped turn the tide of battle, and the ship's engineer, Reinhold Zimmermann, declared himself captain. This was not Griffin's proudest moment, but he was an agent on the run with very few resources at his disposal, so he was going to take advantage of every single one so he could reach his goal. The central agent marveled at the turn of events that brought him here. If Sura hadn't sent him to Null Sub 1, then he had never gotten to be a spice pirate. It wasn't a childhood dream or anything, but he certainly wasn't mad at being here. He couldn't stifle his awe. He was used to high levels of technology, but the aliens had raised the stakes by combining tech from multiple civilizations in a way that blew his mind. Not that he was going to let them know. He and Ever toured the ship with its new captain, trying to act indifferent. "We'll help you," he says casually to Zimmerman, "but my companion and I expect compensation for the asset we'll be bringing to your crew." The alien turns with a sneer. "We were getting on fine without you, lad." He raises a device that Griffin doesn't recognize, pushing a button that powers down both Evers and the agent's suit. "What help do you think you'll bring without those?" Griffin tries to move, but his limbs are frozen, and Zimmerman laughs. "Some people are only as good as their technology, but my people thrive in any atmosphere, with any tools at our disposal. Can you two gents say the same about yourselves or your people, I wonder?" The alien eyes them closely. "You may think of me as an unscrupulous and untrustworthy, but you don't understand our culture. My predecessor was weak, growing soft from his reliance on the things we've scavenged. He lost sight of our true power and potential." The wolf-faced agent shrugged as much as he could in his disabled suit. "What should we do to prove our worth? Descale the floor plating with a laser scrubber? I may not look like it, but I'm used to hard work. I wouldn't push too much with my friend, though. Like you guys, he has the abilities that transcend even this high level of technology." "Don't tell me how to run my ship," Zimmerman snaps at him. "I call the shots." "Okay," Griffin says cheekily, "but don't say I didn't warn you. I'm on a suicide mission. I have nothing waiting for me when I get back, but I imagine you have a mate and an elver you'd like to see again. Play rough and you won't make it back to them. There won't be even a them to make it back to." The alien captain gestures to his crew. They begin dismantling the mech suits, freeing the agents and his companion. Zimmerman continues eyeing them with disbelief, curiosity, and something akin to respect. "Just do what you're told, and I'll make sure you're both taken care of like my very own crew." Later, Ever stands with Griffin on the underside of the ship, scrubbing off Cregan barnacles, their mag boots keeping them from floating off and into the storms of the massive gas giant above them. "Are you really on a suicide mission?" Ever asks. The wolf laughs. "Can't stop thinking about that, can you?" The man shakes his head, and Griffin continues. "All I know is that when I met her, everything else was less important. I don't know if it'll make sense to you until you meet her, but I used to be all about my career. But then, there she was. Everything came from her and moved around her. I wasn't the center of the universe, she was. And more than that, she was the center of every universe. I used to believe that the multiverse was hard and cold, but the energy she gives off is nothing but love. She loves everything she ever dreamed up. We're not talking about just a little bit either. She's completely enamored with every tiny thing she's created. When I met her, I realized she knew me and loved me without question. We're the ones that break our worlds, but everything that comes from her is perfect." 12. So Kui wasn't trying to monitor the entire multiverse. It wasn't intentional at all. She did it the same way water creatures breathe liquid and plant creatures absorb sunlight. When she sensed angels coming for her, she split, choosing to visit every world along the corridor, helping to maximize her experience outside one sliver of reality. As the author of all existence, she wondered if she'd done it on purpose, a way to motivate herself to move more quickly. She was excited to see more. She wanted to jumpstart her interactions. One thing she knew was that shortly after the angels caught her, all things would come to an end, so all things could become new again. She had to visit her creation. She had to see their worlds for herself. It wasn't enough for her to know everything about them. She needed to walk among them. She wanted to feel their joys and sorrows. She wanted to give them the understanding that she hadn't created them with the sole purpose of abandoning them in their broken worlds, but they had the choice to be creators like herself. If they only recognized her qualities in every corner of her creation. So far, many had missed what she felt were obvious clues of her existence and nature, but she knew that once they met her personally, they would know what to look for. The Imogen watched her close iteration gather dark forces around her to set the world right, as she felt grief at allowing her to keep living. The poor thing had no idea that her attempt to take control was bringing to the end to everything. No creative thing had the ability to completely understand the ramifications of her actions since they lacked a direct relation to it all. Sikan wept for her because she knew Connie was only lashing out from her pain. She knew it didn't have to be that way if they met. Many of the worlds she entered were extremely hostile. Centuries of selfishness made them all cautious against anything that was different than them, and she didn't want to scare them, so in every world she tripped or stumbled, intentionally getting her wings caught on something so they wouldn't view her as a threat. Some even rushing to help her when they saw she was unable to care for herself. So she fell into their capable arms, allowing them to take her where they wanted. She was unable to care for herself if things went awry, but she was more interested in seeing what they would do, how they would care for something they thought that couldn't take care of itself. It was a true test of their character, and she was glad to see that most cultures were more than passing. She saw her nature showing through their cultural experience, and she was proud of them. So while she was pleased with the beings she encountered, she found it disturbing that so many had succumbed to the Furbtech devices in its current formation, since it's turned them into the opposite of the thing that she had created them to be. She let them take her, though, and humor them as they tried to give her another device, but she couldn't fathom why they desired so much to give up their own individuality. She made them each unique. Why were they becoming so beige? Why was homogeny so tantalizing? What do you want us to do? 5A_K0N asked CAK_BID through the mind link. We have units unplugging themselves across the multiverse. Her message was unnecessary. The Emperor was already feeling his reach lessen. What was baffling him was how it was happening in so many timelines simultaneously. He had experienced resistance before, easily silencing dissenters, but this unplugging was widespread. Huge numbers of link minds were suddenly dropping off the network at alarming rates. Send every unit who isn't acting as infrastructure along with the supporting no1L_KANs for all available worlds along with Furbtechs bred for maximum levels of cuteness. Sir, have you considered that we have met our network's capacity? We may be experiencing the shedding of weaker units due to a cascading failure. A mind link was never intended to extend as far as we forced it to go. It's buckling under the pressure. I won't accept that possibility. It's failing because you're not trying hard enough. In every world, Sequi's influence spread like wildfire. She showed them how to love the adorable owl-like hamsters in their care and their interconnectivity the planet had because of them, but also taught them how to not be controlled by their technology. The Furbtech had become an integrated part of their societies, and because of that, they could use them to better understand each other's differences, empathize with each other so they could support one another without falling into judgment or hate. Although she was infallible, the Imogen chose to make mistakes so they could understand that perfection wasn't a requirement for her love. She made herself like them, needing to eat and sleep, so they found it possible to follow her example, seeing themselves in her. Unlike the emperors and gods that ruled over them with their false fronts to seem better than the common creature, Sequi demonstrated the beauty in the ordinary, showing them that quiet moments were the greatest. Interestingly, because of this, many hated her for not living up to their expectations. They found it unreasonable to submit to someone who they saw was just like them. Instead of finding the solace that she was offering, where they didn't have to have a standard where they'd live up to or be rejected by, they got angry for not being able to find a way to be right. Those who hated imperfection in themselves, who had now lost the Furbtech's false premise of a beautiful future where they were elevated above everyone else, slipped silently from their worlds to where Connie's agents found them, enticing them with promises of elevation that only the young reality bender could offer. Sequoia watched with a sad but understanding eye as the knot in Cuban Knoll grew. It wasn't the choice she was hoping they would make, but she loved them enough to honor their ability to decide. Still, many flocked to the great creature who appeared in their midst, finding freedom and rest in her. freedom to simply exist without needing to prove themselves. But it was only a slim portion of the population. Many found her to be an amusing novelty, but totally unnecessary to their existence. Once free of the Ferb Tech, they began to hate and scheme against each other again, looking for ways to become more important than those around them, finding status in what they had, or worse, they used the Ferb Tech to plug themselves back into the mind link they escaped. While Sequi was overjoyed at many finding peace, she mourned over those who willingly subjected themselves to the lies they had grown accustomed to. She knew she could force them to follow her, like her dark iteration did, and had to fight against the subconscious urge to do so for their own good. The Imogen knew the resistance they put up was a losing battle anyway. At the end, they'd rejoin her in the timelessness of the everything, and then they would know that it was her who created everything for them. She let them choose for themselves, enduring the pain that their actions temporarily caused her. She hoped they'd figure it out before the end when it was too late to change their choices. When I realized she would always be in love with Griffin, even though he would never be there for her, the Dolphin Warrior says to Sakan as they track through the sand of Lysander. And she was never going to want me, even though I'd been 100% loyal to her and her advancement. That's when I knew I had to walk away. You think I didn't know about all the incidental deaths that I caused on mission? My emphasis at Academy was clear dynamics. I knew what she was doing. I helped her, but that didn't mean anything to her. She had so many opportunities to glass cube Griffin and just kept letting him go. I even let that lion eat his giraffe girlfriend. She never saw it coming. The Illic nods, trying to tune her out. Marilyn had all the mannerisms of a warrior. Why was she letting her feelings make her act like this? On her planet, that mindset was a weakness that would get her killed. Sakan leaps into the air, flying as high as she could to get a view of the surroundings. Are you sure we're on the right planet? She asked through the intercom. It doesn't seem capable of supporting life. It seemed like if the Dolphin was able to be blinded by her own hurt that she would defect from such a powerful ally, could she be trusted to be making rational wartime decisions? He got us kicked out of the Phoenix Club, Terrence complains to Sarah Kay, and you're defending him. It took me 6 subjective weeks to make it back. I need reinforcement, Director. I'll take anybody at this point. Literally, who's at the Academy right now? I'll take them. I don't care who they are. I'm going to finish my mission. The senior agent turns to the otter sitting quietly at the large table. You still training that crazy chick? I could work with that type of backup. I need unpredictability. Terrence, Sarah Kay says sharply, her tone low, but carrying a rattlesnake's warning. What? You saw her on escape yet, Siraj. She's unstable. You would be after what she went through. He turns back to Sebastian. You have your academy fling? You need to be careful. You could lose your long-term objectivity. Isn't that right, boss? Sarah Kay arches an eyebrow at Terrence, but doesn't take the bait. She's running the academy now, actually, she says, enjoying watching the agent's smug look change to surprise. She hasn't been out on a first mission, though. Could be a great opportunity. How does she replace Flockhart without any experience? Terrence asks, bewildered. The acting director shrugs. Clerical error, I guess. She's unpredictable, but has shown great promise. One of the strongest psionics the CIB has seen in its history. I want you to go to Connie. Convince her to go with Agent Gottlieb, Sarah Kay says to Sebastian. Her training program can wait. If she doesn't want to help stop certain, there won't be a multiverse to maintain. The otter nods and rises, his mind racing. How was he supposed to convince a paranoid dictator to help the agency she wanted to destroy? Most of the people on this planet died a long time ago, Marilyn says without stopping. The only ones still here are the sentient machines that look after the corpses. Why did we come to a mostly dead world, Sakan says, circling in for a landing. An epicenter of change is located here, and the people are only dead in one sense. Believe it or not, there's a thriving metropolis all around us. Thillic lands next to Marilyn, now thoroughly convinced that she's unfit for leadership. Before she can say anything, Captain Rayan hands her a pair of goggles and gestures for her to put them on. She does, stopping in her tracks with a gasp. Rain pours down from the night sky and the shiny streets lit by neon signs. People rush by her with their umbrellas up and open as Sakan stares up at the buildings that seem taller than mountains. A cab turns the corner, its headlights washing over her before it splashes through a puddle, throwing water on the curb as it passes. Coming from a war-ravaged world, she had never seen anything so magical in all her life. It was so big, so complete. Hundreds of thousands of people had worked together to build something like this, passing their plans down from generation to generation. Their cooperation astounded her.
End of Chapter 7. Thank you for listening to this audio presentation of She Came From Nowhere, a series novelization written and performed by Caleb Morazi. If you'd like to read more of this book, read chapters from the series, listen to audio, and further support the development of this project, please go to patreon.com/SheCameFromNowhere, link in the description. Please like, share, and subscribe this video. Until next time, we'll see you soon.